Good afternoon and good morning to those of you out west. Welcome to today's democast from the Construction Specifier and the National Electrical Contractors Association, also known as NECA. My name is Farheen. I'm the Associate Editor for the Construction Specifier, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. Just to cover a few housekeeping items before we get started, if you have any questions during today's democast, please enter them using the Q&A section, which you can find at the bottom of your Zoom window. We will address as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Zoom does have a raise hand function, but since we'll be keeping everyone's mics muted, only use the Q&A instead. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties during the democast, you can enter a message in the chat, which you'll find right next to the Q&A, and we'll do our best to help. Today's democast is being recorded and will be available on the Construction Specifier's website by this time next week. Now, I'd like to introduce our speakers, Mike Johnston and Kyle Krieger. Mike is NECA's Executive Director of Codes and Standards. Mike holds a degree in business from the University of Phoenix. He is past chair and member of the NFPA NEC Correlating Committee. Mike is an active member of the NFPA Standards Council, as well as a member of the IBW, ANSI, IAEI, NFPA, SES, ASSP, the UL Electrical Council, and the National Safety Council. He is also a member and immediate past chair of the NFPA Electrical Section. Kyle is NECA's Director of Codes and Standards. Kyle holds a master electrician license in Wisconsin, a commercial electrical inspector license, and design engineer of electrical systems. He is also certified through NFPA as a certified electrical safety compliance professional, also known as CESCP. Kyle currently represents NECA as principal on CMP3 of the NEC and the Correlating Committee for NFPA 72. Kyle is the Assistant Secretary of NECA's Codes and Standards Committee, as well as an active member of NFPA, IAEI, ANSI, SES, and the IBW. In this democast, Mike and Kyle will discuss National Electrical Installation Standards, also known as NEIS, standards as high as your own. This democast will provide a high-level overview exploring the inspiration, history, and development process of NECA's Library of Standards, the NEIS. Highlighting the latest additions to the NEIS library, NECA 5/2023 recommended practices for prefabrication of electrical installations for construction, and NECA 91/2023 recommended practice for maintaining electrical equipment. This webinar will also focus on the benefits of implementing performance workmanship standards into engineering, design, and installation processes. Mike and Kyle, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you joining us today. Please do take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you for those wonderful introductions, and thank you everybody for joining us today as we talk about some of the NEIS standards and the inspiration for those. NECA is very proud of the development of those, and we love to show them off. So with that, to just talk about a little bit about the objectives today. Really our goal is to provide a high-level overview of the NEIS library, some of the development process, the inspiration behind the standards, the reason that we put those out, how we work with ANSI to develop the standards, and the relationship between the NEIS library and the National Electrical Code, as well as some of the benefits for you all as specifiers, architects, designers, engineers, installers, inspectors, whatever group you come from. There's definitely a benefit for using and implementing the NEIS standards. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the new standards that we have recently published or will be publishing pretty shortly here. So what are the NEIS? So the National Electrical Installation Standards were first developed by the National Electrical Contractors, or NECA, starting in 1996. They really address quality and performance and establish a level of workmanship for electrical installations. The NEIS are ANSI-approved standards. NECA has been a part of, or an accredited standards development organization with ANSI since they started the NEIS library. Currently, we've got about 45 standards in the NEIS library as it sits right now. So as I said, they really address the workmanship or the quality and installation of products and electrical systems. NEIS are intended to go above and beyond the minimum installation requirements of the NEC. When we look at the requirements in the NEC, we always talk about those as the minimum installation requirements, one step above illegal. That's how I like to refer to it, right? That's the minimum you have to do to comply. Well, the NEIS really focuses on what is that good workmanship piece look like, and what is a professional and skillful installation. Also addresses quality and performance aspects of the electrical construction. So the inspiration for the NEIS, when 1996, when the standards were they first started to develop the standards, some of the inspiration was to determine a need for quality and performance. How can we provide a resource for the electrical construction industry that really addresses those quality and performance aspects that aren't necessarily spelled out in other standards and codes? We identified a lack of quality and descriptive material detailing quality of workmanship. Specifically, you know, that old situation with codes, it tells you what you have to do, but not necessarily how you have to do to comply with that. And that's where the NEIS really filled that gap. NECA's flagship standard, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to switch it over to Mike Johnson at this point now. So Mike, if you want to take it away with the NECA 1 standard.
Sure, thank you, Kyle. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, coming in loud and clear.
Yeah, great. It's great to be here. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Construction Specifier, for working with NECA to present this and host this. And as Kyle indicated, NECA 1 is where it all began for this series of workmanship standards. And as Kyle indicated, you know, the inspiration, the original development was focusing on the good workmanship aspects of installations, but this series of standards and recommended practices is evolving to address all sorts of common and good practices in electrical contracting, not just focusing on a neat and workmanlike installation, but focusing on the best practices for all aspects of electrical contracting, which is helping them gain popularity. The flagship document was the first ANSI approved standard, and being approved by the American National Standards Institute carries a lot of weight and a lot of credibility with NECA's potential new customers and NECA's existing customers. Next slide. So the old clause in the NEC is that equipment be installed in a neat and workmanlike manner, and that language has been there since the 40s, the 1940s. And I think a lot of folks knew what it meant, but they never really knew how to describe it. In other words, they knew it when they saw it, but it was difficult to describe. Workmanship is in the eyes of the beholder, and it's a requirement that is very much subject to the experience and training of the individuals making judgment on it. And that's where NECA saw a great opportunity to help explain what constitutes good workmanship in all aspects of electrical construction and electrical contracting. And the NEIS do incorporate issues of quality and workmanship, and they assist professionals in contract document development, specifications. They assist enforcers in passing judgment on what constitutes good workmanship. Next slide, please. So we're going to look at a few photos, and as I said earlier, it's not hard to tell when a craftsman performed an installation. This is a generator termination box, and there's a significant parallel arrangement connected to the load side or output side of this generator. And without good workmanship or work by someone who is trained and qualified and a craftsperson, this could be a nightmare. These are, it looks to be about 8 600 kc mil conductors per phase and per neutral conductor. And if the workmanship was not right on and there wasn't good training and experience, you wouldn't end up with a installation that constitutes good workmanship. And in the eyes of the beholder and most people, they would say that this looks like it should look. Next slide, please. And it really extends to all aspects of the installations, whether it's the support for wiring methods and equipment, like you see here, appropriately sized support means unistrut and supporting means for the conduit systems and so forth. It's set up in a way where it's ease of installation for the contractor, and the owner has a product they can be proud of and one that will last into the future. Next slide, please. One of the things in a previous life, part of my career, I worked as an inspector, and I know Kyle did too. And when you walked onto a job site and you looked up and you saw a conduit that was installed in a manner you see in the photo, it's easy to have a raised comfort level on that job site, knowing that the work is representative of qualified individuals on that project. So it's very much apparent to both craftsmen, workers in the field, and especially owners. I think good workmanship is the best form of marketing. Customers do know the difference in the long run. Next slide, please. And here's another photo, some fairly large conductors terminated in a section of switchgear. And while it looks good from this view, there's a lot of workmanship that goes into this planning the conduit entries into the top of the enclosure so that these large conductors could be trained and flared and dressed into the terminals where they belong. If we didn't make a proper entry to the top of the enclosure, we could end up with a rat's nest for these terminations. But this certainly is representative of good workmanship in those terminations. Next slide, please. Kyle, you want to talk about the flow of our process?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So, like one of the things that we try to emphasize when we talk about the NEIS library is the ANSI accreditation. So the graphic that you see up on the presentation right now outlines a high-level overview of the ANSI accreditation process. And the reason this is important is it creates a level of transparency when we develop our standards. So they go through the ANSI accredited process, they're approved by ANSI, and in doing so, it's not just NECA developing a standard. We work with an SME that authors the standard, develops a draft. We notify the public through ANSI that we're going to be creating this standard, and then it goes through the review process, both public review and a consensus body that reviews that. And we really pride ourselves on trying to achieve 100% consensus when we put our standards through the process, meaning that at the end of the day, we really hope that there are no comments or no issues that we did not address when we finally put those standards forward to ANSI for final approval. And it can be very rigorous to go through the ANSI accreditation process or the ANSI approval process for a standard. So like I said, we utilize an SME to write our standards. We then perform an industry review announcement that goes out through the PINs or the product initiation notification system through ANSI. And then once that the industry has had a chance to comment or review the standards that we're developing, we then would start our balloting and consensus process. We canvass for individuals that are interested in being part of that review consensus body. And then we will ballot those consensus body members to review that standard and then provide us with any additional feedback other than what may come in from the general public. Canvas groups are made up. We've got a list of 500 or so individuals that we'll send a notification out to every time we're looking to develop a consensus body. And then we try to generate a list that is equally balanced and as best we can. You know, we have specific criteria that we try to meet for balance and a good equally represented groups for our NEIS standards. There's 4 classifications that we have represented in our consensus bodies. There's the government classification, so inspectors working for government agencies, specifiers working for government agencies. There is the construction group, so electrical contractors, any individuals that related to construction, producers, that would be manufacturers, NEMA, those types of groups, and then general interest. So if there's just an individual that has a general interest or an invested interest in the standard and wants to be part of that review process, they could absolutely do so as well. But the key is to never have more than 50% of one of those classifications dominate that consensus body, because it's important to have diversity and balance in the review of those standards. Like I said, it's a balloting process. We try to go through and get 100% consensus. If the first ballot we don't get the consensus that we're looking for, we would then address any comments that come in and then provide another ballot to our consensus group going through the ANSI accredited process for consensus body review. Going through this process really really establishes a level of integrity. You know, ANSI exists for a reason. They demand transparency, which puts a lot more credit to the standards that we develop. There's no operating in silos or developing standards that aren't necessarily transparent in nature. And that's really something that we pride ourselves on, that anybody can participate in this discussion and the review process with these standards. Some of our industry partners, and this is not a full list, and when I say industry partners, these are groups that we will rely on for feedback and reviewing as part of our consensus body. Or they have members that will provide consensus body review for us as well. So Mike, would you like to talk a little bit about the relationship with the NEIS standards and the NEC?
Sure, Kyle, thank you. That was a nice overview of our process and those involved in the process. And one thing we have found along the way is that many of our Canvas group members involved in the development of the standard and voting on it, they're also many times unfamiliar with what constitutes good workmanship in electrical construction in general. So they're learning along the way, as we are, to develop these baseline quality and performance standards that address workmanship. But the relation to the NEC stems back, as I said earlier, into the 1940s, when that original clause was added to the code that said equipment, and equipment's a generalized term. It means just about everything that's used in an installation has to be installed in a manner that's neat and workmanlike. And while the code had that prescriptive requirement, it never explained how to accomplish that. And so that's where NECA identified a gap and a need to fill with its series of standards that explain what constitutes in various aspects of electrical construction. Next slide, please. So these standards and recommended practices provide the details on how to accomplish an installation that meets the good workmanship criteria. So the information in these standards help establish a baseline that an installation can be compared to when workmanship becomes questionable. The NEIS addresses information not contained in minimum codes and standards. In other words, a lot of what's contained in these standards it definitely meets the minimum, but it may exceed or be greater than the minimum in some cases. And what that ends up doing is resulting in an installation that represents quality and is a dependable installation for an owner as an end result. And owners don't forget. Next slide, please. So advantages we found of the NEIS are positioning qualified electrical contractors in a good way with their customers and potential new customers, but also providing them with a series of ANSI accredited standards that they can claim they build projects to. And it works as a sales feature for many electrical contractors. And it's not just NECA contractors, it's the entire industry. This is an ANSI accredited group of standards. And being ANSI accredited, it's available, and participation is by the entire industry. Some of the things achieved using the NEIS are improved reliability, reduced liabilities, and reduced inspection problems. It increases confidence levels with enforcing agencies, and also can save significant time in specification writing. Codes specification can just refer to ANSI accredited NEIS documents, and there's assurances that those documents meet or exceed the criteria that owners are often looking for in high specification projects. Next slide, please. The engineering teams and architectural teams depend on these standards, and in many cases, they're actually involved in the Canvas groups responsible for development of such standards. So while they meet the minimum requirements of the NEC and other standards where workmanship is mentioned, they often exceed in many levels, in many areas, those minimum requirements. Codes and standards that are legally adopted citations can be written when someone breaks the law. So it's an interesting concept. The NEIS do help ensure that the installation practices live up to expected professional design integrity, the engineering and design of a project. Next slide, please. And they also improve clarity and communication between those on the front lines, installing, general foreman, project managers, and so forth. And also can improve relations on the job between subcontractors, relations with engineering teams, and general contractor relationships with subcontractors and owners are improved greatly by use and reference to the National Electrical Installation Standards. And it provides owners with an objective method and means to communicate, clarify what their installation and their property should look like as an end result from an electrical standpoint. Next slide, please. And I talked a little bit about the reliability. Each one of these NEIS standards, first of all, has a safety component, and second of all, has a maintenance component, and most of them have a component that addresses commissioning. And we actually have an NEIS that addresses complete recommended practices for commissioning processes. So reliability is enhanced greatly by using the National Electrical Installation Standards as a benchmark to accomplish those requirements in the field. And use of these helps build reputations. You know, electrical contractors, as they perform work under their normal operations, day in and day out from year to year, they're constantly building reputations, and those reputations and that credibility often results in additional work and additional projects being awarded because owners and customers know what to expect. Sometimes it's not just the price that's attractive to folks, it's dependability, workmanship, the quality of the product. Next slide, please. Kyle, you want to mention some of the new standards, and what an exciting time to be in our industry. The electrical industry is evolving rapidly, a lot of new technologies, and Kyle's going to talk a little bit about some new standards that we've developed and maybe some in development.
Sure, thanks, Mike. And just to touch on a little bit of the stuff that you had discussed as well, one of the things that I'll when I'm out meeting with different groups or different contractors, different NECA chapters, you know, there's a lot of agencies or government agencies, government groups, customers and whatnot, where they don't want to just have their electrical systems installed to the minimum criteria established in the NEC. They have specific workmanship specifications that they want to write into those agreements and the contracts with the general contractor, electrical contractor, when they're doing a renovation or renovating or replacing their electrical equipment. And the NEIS really fills a nice gap there. They don't have to create specifications on their own. A lot of the topics and a lot of the systems that they're working or having work done on already exist, and there is a workmanship standard there for them to refer to instead of having to recreate the wheel already. So they definitely do fill a nice gap there. A lot of the NEIS standards, or I should say a lot, but a couple of the NEIS standards are actually referenced in the NEC as well. So like Mike said, there's a couple of new standards that have been recently approved or recently published. The first one I wanted to touch on is NECA 5. So this is a recommended practice for prefabrication of electrical installations for construction. So like a lot of the standards that are developed, including the ones that NECA develops, we try to identify industry trends and industry needs. And as many of you are well aware, prefabrication is really the future of the construction industry. And there's a lot of challenges that come up with prefabrication. And this standard really does a nice job of providing a higher level overview of what type of things to be concerned with and review and deal with that you may have to deal with to perform electrical prefabrication in construction. We partnered, or I should say MCA Inc. served as the SME on this one. They're experts in agile construction prefabrication and the science of construction productivity. When I say science of construction productivity, it's not just a consulting group. They're made up of doctors and individuals that have studied and researched this and done a lot, have put out a lot of different materials regarding prefabrication. So like I said, it really is a nice effort here to put out a document that creates a nice resource for individuals that are facing these challenges with prefabrication in electrical installations. You know, you can see some of the topics that are covered throughout the standard or the recommended practice. A couple of the things that I wanted to highlight specifically is the measuring of success of prefab, and then some of the lessons learned. You know, there's a discussion or there's information on there to how to identify whether or not your prefabrication is being successful, and just completing the installation, obviously, and doing it to a high level of quality is the goal, ultimate goal. But there's a lot of challenges that come up with prefabrication installations that we may not necessarily be thinking about. One of those that we discuss a lot here is inspections. How do you deal with electrical inspections for prefabricated assemblies? And there's some good information in there on that as well. Another one of the standards that recently just got its ANSI approval back in May, about a month ago now, is NECA 91, recommended practice for maintaining electrical equipment. Some of you may be very well or very familiar with NFPA 70B. So in 2023, when the NFPA 70B document went through the last revision, it was elevated to a standard. So now it's a standard for maintaining electrical equipment. And that creates a nice trilogy at the NFPA standard level for the NEC, NFPA 70E, and NFPA 70B. And this recommended practice is really to take that and put a workmanship spin on it and work in conjunction with those documents to achieve safe and reliable electrical equipment maintenance. So this one, like I said, just received ANSI approval and should be available digitally relatively soon here. You know, it's one of the standards that we're pretty proud of, and we're excited for it to be available to the industry. Some of the other titles that we have, you can see up on the screen there. We cover topics like microgrids, maintaining medium voltage cables, installing medium voltage cables, fire alarm systems, service entrance, grounding, and bonding. We have a standard installation standard for selective coordination, selecting overcurrent devices for selective coordination. As an inspector, that was an issue that I dealt with all the time. You know, selective coordination always seems to be an afterthought when installations are taking place and everybody's trying to meet tight timelines. And as we gear towards the end of the final occupancy, you start asking questions about selective coordination, and that deer in the headlights look comes up. So it's nice to know that there's resources out there available to help individuals, contractors, designers walk and guide through that process in achieving those required installations from the NEC. Mike, if you want to tell us a little bit about what the future holds for NEIS and then wrap it up for us, that'd be great.
Sure. As you can see, NECA's progressive and we're following trends in the industry. And we can say that to our knowledge, the NECA 5 prefabrication is the first ANSI accredited standard on prefabrication processes in the world. And same follows true for the recommended practices on maintaining electrical equipment that line up directly with NFPA 70B. So very useful documents that totally align with current trends in our industry, with an increased focus on more efficiency in the field for contractors through prefabrication and the heightened awareness and focus on equipment maintenance. NECA intends to continue to revise the NEIS in accordance with the ANSI essential requirements on a 5-year basis. And we're also watching things that are happening in the industry, like limited energy technology trends, communication means, 5G to 10G communication networks, things that are going to be needed in not only minimum codes and standards, but what the trends are related to workmanship in those aspects of the business. Next slide, please. And that brings us to a close. We'd love to have more time to spend with you on this stuff, but we wanted to do a high level, and everyone's going to receive a copy of the presentation. And I believe there's a copy of NECA 5 is going to be provided to the attendees. And I didn't want to steal construction specifier's thunder if that was going to be announced, but I wanted to say that, and then again thank construction specifier for being such a gracious host and letting us provide this information for the industry. Next slide, please. Kyle, do you want to summarize, or would you like me to?
Yeah, no, I can take the summary here, and just to go over some of the stuff that we talked about. We discussed the NEIS history and how those standards are developed, and really what the inspiration for the NEIS library is. We looked at the relationship between the NEC and the NEIS, and discuss the benefits of implementing the NEIS workmanship standards into your daily job functions. And then we talked, like Mike had said, we discussed some of the new standards and what the future holds for the NEIS. And Mike hit the nail on the head there. We are absolutely going to provide every one of the attendees today will be receiving a digital copy of NECA 5 that'll be provided to you via email through construction specifiers. So they've got the list of attendees, and you should be looking forward to receiving that copy as well. As far as contact information, if you would like to get in touch with Mike or myself or both of us, you can see our contact information on the screen there. Additionally, if any of you are interested in being part of the consensus body process, you would like to take part in a review of a specific standard, you can email Mike or myself or go to NECA's website, necanet.org. And there's a link there to the NEIS, and you'll see an opportunity to sign up and participate in a consensus body for the NEIS review process. And I'd just like to say thanks again, Construction Specifier, for having us, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you so much, Kyle, for this excellent presentation. We do have some time for questions, so just open the Q&A located at the bottom of your Zoom window and post your questions. We already do have a few here, so let's get started. Who determines an installation is installed in a neat and workmanlike manner?
I can take that one, Kyle. Yeah, thanks for the question. It's when you look at the NEC or other codes or standards that have the workmanship clause, it's typically the responsibility of the authority having jurisdiction to make interpretations and either issue approvals or write correction notices based on the findings on specific projects. So it's largely the responsibility of the AHJ, but owners can get involved in that process as well. Things can be identified by inspectors that work for engineering firms who are there on the job sites to inspect in accordance with the integrity of their design. So it actually can come from multiple sources, the workmanship call in the field, but it's primarily the AHJ that can make that call.
Thank you so much. Are the NEIS mandatory requirements?
Kyle, you want me to take that one too?
Yeah, go for it. You're on a roll, so why stop a good thing, right? Oh, it looks like screen might have froze up a little bit there. So the NEIS are voluntary, unless they are specifically referenced by a jurisdiction.
Correct. And oftentimes jurisdictions have in their administrative provisions that one who has a construction permit has to comply with the approved or the reviewed plans and specifications that are stamped and approved by the jurisdiction. So oftentimes the NEIS, if they're mentioned in specification or even on the project plans, they become part of that document that's legally enforced by the jurisdiction. And the jurisdiction themselves can adopt into law the National Electrical Installation Standards. And there have been a few cases historically where jurisdictions have adopted not only the NEC, but they've adopted the NEIS for use in the field.
Thank you so much. And the last question I'll take here is, does the low voltage NEIS standard include access control equipment? And does this include both traditionally powered devices as well as PoE devices?
Yeah, Kyle, you want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'm not sure which limited energy standard is being referred to. I know we are looking at evolution of our limited energy standards, the one we worked specifically with VIXI in the past to update those. But all of those technologies, even the lighting standards. Lighting is lighting, whether it's power over Ethernet driven, or whether it's LED driven, or whatever it is, by the Construction Specification Institute's master format. Lighting is lighting. So if we do a standard on lighting, power over Ethernet types of lighting would be covered, and just like it is in the NEC. And power over Ethernet is not only used for lighting in the field, but it's used for specific utilization equipment, where the power for the device and the communications and data for the same device are sent over a common cable. And that's information that's evolving. It's covered by the NEC from a minimum code standpoint, and our performance standards will evolve to address the workmanship aspects of those new technologies. Good question.
Thank you so much. That was all the time we had for questions. Thank you so much, Mike and Kyle, and thank you to everybody who joined us today. If you need to reach out with any additional questions, the presenter's contact information is currently up on the screen. Just a reminder before everyone leaves, if you would like to rewatch today's presentation or share it with a colleague, we'll be emailing the link, including NECA's offer, to the recording to everybody who registered for the democast within a week. So keep an eye out on your inbox. Finally, after you shut down Zoom, you'll be taken to a survey to provide feedback on your experience today. Please take a moment to complete the survey, as it helps us to continue to serve your needs better in the future. On behalf of the Construction Specifier and NECA, thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks again.
Thank you.